Hi, this is JP Newman of Investing on Purpose. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Tom Wheelwright, who has been a personal friend and happens to be, I believe, the #1 tax advisor and strategist in the world. I have interviewed so many people around this world of taxes, and nobody can articulate a better business strategy than Tom Wheelwright. Tom has a book. I don't know if you guys know his book. It's the current book is the Win-Win Wealth Strategy that just launched. It's the 7 things that most people don't even know that the government incentivizes you to do as a business to save a ton of money. Completely what the government wants you to do. I think you're going to be blown away by this conversation. Tom's first book, Tax-Free Wealth, sold over 300,000 copies, national bestseller. In addition to Tom's 30 years experience of traveling the world talking about this with Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I can only tell you out of all episodes, a lot of people don't want to talk about tax. This is the episode you need to listen to for purpose, for profit, because what you're going to realize is that these are not tax-free loopholes. These are actually incentives that the government wants you to do to create a better world. Just another way that the government looks at sustainability. And I'm so glad to be part of this conversation and sharing it with you. Tom, since the time I created this show to think about how business can be used for sustainability, you've been on my top list of people I wanted to interview. I thought about you from the beginning, so I'm just so glad to have you here and share you with other people today.
Well, thanks. I'm very happy to be here. Always happy to be with you, JP. We've been doing education, financial education together for a long time, 10, 12 years, right?
Definitely. And Tom, I have to say to start with, like, before I met you, I had no faith in securities attorneys or CPAs being able to give any real business strategy. A lot of times I'd spend hours, it almost felt like an hourglass on a computer, trying to get to an answer around tax strategy, tax ideas, tax philosophy. And I would just keep getting these wimpy, lukewarm answers that made no sense, that I knew not what to do with it. And then I met you, Tom, and you and I have a fun jam session. It's never dull with us.
Never.
And Tom, it's interesting when you think about the title of the podcast, Investing on Purpose, and what Ryan and I are up to, you wouldn't necessarily ordinarily think of, okay, how does sustainability, how does purpose come into the world of business from a tax perspective? I don't get the mix together. And I just think it's so cool, Tom, that not only is that going to be a fun topic for us, but also let's talk about your new book you came out with, because it's ironic that the time that I wanted to talk to you, you're covering a lot of this in your book. So we'll open that up in a second. And as a teaser to the audience, Tom promises in his book that he helped a client figure out with tax planning, and I'm saying this right, Tom, how they were able to get a Ferrari, not for free, but well tax planned. Is that a fair statement, Tom?
I would say that the title of the chapter is How to Get the Government to Pay for Your Ferrari. And that's effectively what happened. Now, money's fungible, but that is effectively the truth of the matter. And this is a real client. It's a real situation. So this isn't some fairy tale.
Well, Tom, let's start with this. When most people hear from people like yourself, except they're hearing about what tax loopholes, money for the rich, how the rich get richer. There's this whole kind of notion out there that taxes are evil and there are loopholes, and like somehow we're trying to play a game of cat and mouse against the government. I know that's not how you think. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of background on kind of how you came to your philosophy, which is quite different than that?
Yeah. So I've been in the tax world for over 40 years, and including 3 years in the national office of National Tax Department of Ernst & Young, 4 years as in-house tax advisor for a Fortune 1000 company, 14 years as an adjunct professor in the Masters of Tax program at Arizona State University, 15 years traveling the world with Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame, doing financial education, talking about taxes, and 25 years buying, building, selling CPA firms. So I've got a lot of experience, and I've been looking at this a lot, and not just in the U.S. but internationally. So in my book, we actually examined 15 countries and the tax incentives for 15 countries. You of course remember my first book, Tax-Free Wealth, which you helped launch. And Tax-Free Wealth, of course, is basically tells you that the tax law is an instruction guide for reducing your taxes. What we did when we looked at the Win-Win Wealth strategy, I really looked at, this whole idea that you're talking about. Well, is this a zero-sum game? In other words, if the government's going to win, does that mean I lose? And if I win, does that mean the government loses? Meaning I'm cheating, right? And I'm
Correct.
cheating so the government loses. And what I looked at was I actually looked at 7 fairly broad areas of investing and said, okay, here's 7 investments where you can win and the government can win. So that's hence the name, the win-win wealth strategy. 7 investments the government will pay you to make. Is that it doesn't have to be a win-lose. People quickly learn after they see their first paycheck that you're a partner with the government, right? The government is your partner. Like it or not, you can't get out of it. The government, and if the government's your partner, the question is, what kind of partner is the government to you, and what kind of partner are you to the government? And most people, frankly, are silent partners with the government, and the government just takes their pound of flesh and off they go, and the government's okay with that. Rich people, and I'm going to distinguish actually wealthy people, so not people who make a lot of money, but people who build a lot of wealth. What they've learned over the years is that actually the more wealth you build, the less tax you pay. Okay. Well, the more income you earn, the more tax you pay. The more wealth you build, the less tax you pay. And so all they're doing is they're saying, well, wait a minute. Are there areas of investing where I can be an active partner with the government instead of a silent partner? And these are 7 areas where you can be an active partner with the government. So I don't see it as a win-lose. It is for most people because they don't understand that you can be a win-win. Now, you and I have had many discussions over the years about how do we make it a win for you, right? I mean, that's part of my job with you is to help you make it a win. At the same time, what it does is it allows you to really serve a lot more people and do a lot more good in the world because you're doing the things the government wants done.
I mean, that is absolutely a fascinating idea. Again, it's such a different idea than this notion of loopholes or trying to dodge things. Can we talk a little bit about what the 7 areas are and why the government? Because you said to me once, Tom, years ago, you give me a tax code book to read, and I'll tell you what the priorities of a government are. I never forgot. I have a lot of Thomisms in my life, and that was one of them. So what are the 7 areas? What is it that the government? What are the priorities of the U.S. government in this tax code with these incentives?
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, I'm flattered that you remember that, JP, because I do believe that. And it's interesting. I've traveled probably 30 countries and 6 continents with Robert, and I always look at the tax law of the country and I'm going, okay, what do they prioritize, right? What is important to them? And then I look at their economy and I'm going, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, in the US, what would you think number 1 would be? Well, business. What is the US government historically valued more than anything else? Jobs and job creation. You look at what do candidates for government talk about almost, 100% of the time. They're talking about, we're going to create jobs. We're going to have better jobs. We're going to better paying jobs. I mean, even our current president is not exactly the most capitalistic president we've ever had. Even he's talking about more jobs, right? Right. And so because of that, governments all over the world incentivize business first. And business is actually, it's almost like it's the foundation for almost all government incentives. There are 2 of the 7 that aren't business related, but the other 5 all have as a foundation is that participation requires that you be involved some way, somehow in business. So the very first chapter, the very first investment I talk about is business. It is the longest chapter on purpose because there are the most incentives and it makes sense. So if I get a job for myself, that's great. Government says fine and pay your tax. If I create jobs for other people, I pay a lot less tax. Now the employees pay tax, but I don't pay tax. And so really it's like, well, we're only going to tax once, right? We're either going to tax the company if they don't hire people, or we're going to tax the employees if they do. And, smart companies say like Amazon, for example, or Tesla, they hire thousands and thousands of people. And because of that, they pay very little, that's one of the reasons they pay very little tax. So business is number 1. Interestingly enough, JP, did an example in the book. Because I know you've been through it, and you know that I do run numbers because I am an accountant and I cannot help myself. But one of the first numbers I did is I said, if somebody started a business out of their house, how much of the cost of starting that business would the government pay for? And it turns out it's over 100%. So literally,
wow.
Literally the government will pay you to start a business. And it's just because if you think about it, well, why, how is that even possible? Well, you have expenses that you're not deducting. And when you have a business, you get to deduct them. So those are expenses. You're not increasing your expenses. You're just increasing your tax deductions, which means that you're paying less tax on your wages or other interest income, dividend income, whatever else that other income is. And you pay so much less that you literally can pay for the business startup costs. And since you get it all in the year you start up the business, the government literally will pay you to start a business.
What's interesting, Tom, about what you're saying is not only will the government let you, help you start your business, but there's a reason for it. The reason is, from what I'm listening to you, is because the government wants to encourage as many job creation as possible. It's something they want to incentivize. When you mentioned the Amazon thing earlier, all the soundbite that I hear and that most people hear out there is like, Amazon stealing money. They have this sneaky office in Ireland with all these other companies. And how could a company that has $3.5 trillion, whatever their revenue model, the real numbers are, and they don't pay a single penny of taxes, which is not true, because I think if I recollect, we're talking about just corporate taxes, if that's good. Tell me if I have this right, but they still pay lots of other taxes, including the sales tax that comes in. So, but it feels very sneaky when it's talked about by the media. And what you're saying is, it's perfectly designed for what it's meant to do. Is that right?
Well, yeah. And we can unpack a lot of that. Amazon, I would like to ask everybody, how would the pandemic have gone for you had it not been for Amazon? Right. So are you really complaining about Amazon after you just lived through 2.5 years of pandemic and Amazon delivered everything to your door? That it's kind of disingenuous in my mind, because
I guess the hard part, Tom, is these companies are so profitable. Some of these companies are so profitable that it looks, if you don't understand the basis behind it, it looks sneaky. It looks nefarious without any explanation.
It does, but remember this. So Amazon lost money the first 20 years. They didn't make any money their first 20 years of existence. Okay, well, so the next 20 years, they're recapturing those. They're actually using up those losses, right? So if you look at the history of the company and not just 1 year, okay, the company is just, for a lot of years, the reason they didn't pay tax was because they were just recovering their losses. That's all they were doing.
Carry forward losses.
And then the second investment in Seven Investment, it's that I talk about out of the seven, is technology. And Amazon has created an enormous amount of technology. They completely changed the way we live. And that technology has its own set of tax benefits. And so all the government's saying is, look, Amazon, you put all this money in, you do all this work, your employees are going to pay a lot of tax, but we're going to make you pay a lot of tax. So yeah, Jeff Bezos doesn't pay a lot of tax, but I tell you that the thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, they all pay income tax. So to say, and who's really paying that money? Well, Amazon is. Right? I mean, those salaries are being paid by Amazon. So to say that Amazon isn't paying income tax is even by itself a fallacy, because it's just that it pays it through the salaries it pays employees. Think about how much less Amazon could pay its employees if the employees didn't have to pay tax.
So, Tom, would you say, based on that reply that you just gave me, that you feel like, a lot of people would say, like, this shows that our tax code's broken and it's messed up, but I think from what you're saying, based on your thesis of your book, and what you're saying now is, no, it's actually the tax code's working like it should by balancing the right parties. Is that a fair statement, or would you say not exactly?
I do think. Now, I didn't go into this with any preconceived notions, okay, which you can find in the last chapter on retirement plans, because I've long said I don't like government retirement plans, and yet I prove that they work. In chapter 8, I actually proved that they actually do work. And so contrary to what I've always believed, I ran the numbers. But what I did find as I was writing the book is that I found that the government actually makes more money with the exception of retirement plans, the government makes more money than the taxpayer does. So the government, let me give you an example here. And I'm going to use your business as the example.
Okay.
Let's say that the government decides they're going to go out and build they're going to build housing. So they go build a $100,000 unit, and it costs them $100,000 to do that. Now they could do that. Now nobody in their right mind really wants to live in government housing. At the same time,
it'll be 900,000 once it goes over.
True. But let's say it's actually 100,000. So the government spends 100,000, they get $100,000 of value back. But if they give JP Newman an incentive, or JP Newman's investors an incentive, and say, well, tell you what, we'll give you a $20,000 incentive if you'll go take your $80,000, right? Combine it with our $20,000 and go build that housing unit. Well, now the government can actually build 5 times the housing units by incentivizing you instead of doing it themselves. It's a way the government leverages taxpayer money. So, if you think, well, you make your money really on debt and taxes. That's as much as anything is how a real estate investor makes their money, debt and taxes, tax savings and the benefits of debt. You make your money on that. Well, the government makes their money also leveraging. So you make more money with debt because you're leveraging. The government makes more money leveraging by using tax incentives. That's how they leverage. So they really take very little risk. They don't have to do any of they take the risk. They actually are giving that incentive, right? So they are risking that money.
But the project fails, you're still going to have the housing.
Right. But my point is that they're not having to do any of the work. Just think of it this way. So in the game of taxes, the government makes all of the rules. It enforces the rules, it judges the rules, and it can change the rules at any time. And in fact, you can never get rid of the government as your partner, ever.
Yeah,
and so sense. It doesn't even matter. You can move to Timbuktu and you still pay U.S. taxes, okay? Because you're a citizen of the United States. So given that, the government, one of the things I show in the book is that the government literally makes money on this. So this is not just the government wants more housing built. The government literally makes more money than if they built the housing themselves. And they make a lot more money. They literally, because when you start making money, we were talking right before we started recording, JP, that what happens? Okay, first year you don't pay tax, but second year you do, right? Yeah. Third year you do, the fourth year you do. Well, guess what? The government gets a share of that. So the government's just like any other investor. They've said, we're going to invest in these projects, housing being one. We're going to invest in these. We're willing to put money into these investments. We know that we're going to lose some. We know we're going to win some. We know we're going to win more than we lose. That's what's going to happen. And they've proven it. I mean, taxes, the U.S. government has collected more taxes this year than ever. Yeah. Okay. So the government's winning. It is working. Right. So you're right.
Your point, Tom, is it's not a revenue problem. If the government's taking in plenty of money, it's how we manage and budget it, which is more of a congressional thing. It's not a tax code thing. It sounds like it's more of like how we spend.
What I'm saying is I'm actually going a step further than that, JP. I'm saying that the tax law, using incentives in the tax law actually makes the government more money than if they didn't have these incentives. So in other words, it's not that the government is giving up revenue. They are not. They're making more revenue. And it's completely contrary to the dialogue, but that's why. So the last time we were in high inflation and a recession was in the early 80s, right? Late 70s, early 80s. And everybody's talking today about how, the Fed raised interest rates, Paul Volcker saved the country. I'm going, wait a minute. You forget that there were two things that happened, not just one. The first was, yes, the Fed raised interest rates. But the second was in 1981, Ronald Reagan passed a major tax reduction, in particular for real estate. Mm-hmm. And so he was stimulating investment at the same time, Volcker was raising interest rates. And that was a necessary give and take, because he knew that if he gave certain tax benefits, and particularly in real estate, that was the huge tax reduction in real estate in 1981. I'm old enough to remember this very well. And a huge tax reduction. So that's what it was that tax reduction that brought us out of the recession. It wasn't the interest rates. The interest rates brought down inflation, but they would have pushed us deeper into a recession had not Reagan in 81, 82, 84, and 86 reduced taxes. So, Dr. Art Laffer, who was his chief economist at the time, by the way, has endorsed the Win-Win Wealth Strategy as a book.
Terrific. Terrific.
So, he's one of my heroes, because he was really the driver. We call it Reaganomics or the Laffer curve. He was the driver behind lower taxes will stimulate greater growth. And we've had an historic 40 years of growth as a result of that. And I think people are forgetting that right now. And so the worst thing that could happen now, frankly, would be to raise taxes while we're in this, recession and high interest rate, high inflation rate. Worst thing in the world they could do would be to raise taxes.
Gotcha. Hey, Tommy, you mentioned something interesting. And again, it kind of ties in with the podcast, and it's fun having you on, because a lot of my guests so far have been giving the case as to why creating sustainability and why having purpose in your business actually creates more profitable businesses like the Tom Bacons and what have you. You're kind of a deep how. Like, a lot of times I'm getting now feedback from people. Well, how do I, if I actually use purpose and I actually try to do something good to serve humanity, maybe more than usual, how can I benefit from a tax perspective? And you even mentioned in your book, you say you actually can make the world a better place, which you wouldn't expect to be anywhere within a tax book about, because you're talking about incentives, but could you talk more, if you're an entrepreneur that's looking at, hey, I do want to create a business that's meaningful or that serves government incentives and maybe even bigger things, which I know there's, B Corps and things like. Oh. If there's an entrepreneur listening, what advice would you give to someone who really is purpose-driven in their business?
Remember what Buckminster Fuller said. He was, one of our great geniuses of the 20th century. He said, the more people I serve, the more effective I become. The more people I serve, the more effective I become. I've kind of borrowed that, said the more people I serve, the less taxes I pay. If you look at the first 5 of the 7, okay, the last 2 are about security. They're insurance and retirement. The first 5 are all let's just go through them: business, technology, real estate, energy, and agriculture. I don't think anybody's going to complain about a farmer paying low taxes. Farmers produce our food. We have no food without farmers. We don't raise our own food, right? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine why people are complaining about energy producers paying low taxes. And yet then they get in their car and they drive thousands of miles. I'm going, I don't understand. That's a complete disconnect for me, because we need energy. The whole economy runs on energy. So, the only question is it fossil fuel energy or is it renewable energy? Well, the former administration focused very heavily on fossil fuels. The current administration focuses very heavily on renewable fuels, renewable energy. They're both in the tax law and they both have incentives. So what happens is, I'll give you another example. Take renewable energy, take solar. If I put solar panels on my house, I get a tax credit because the government says we want you to put solar panels on your house. If I put solar panels on my business, I get a tax credit and a tax deduction. So in other words, what they're saying is, look, I'm serving more people because my business, of course, covers all the employees, right, that are working there at that business. If I serve more people, I get a better tax benefit. And that's one of the core messages of this book. This is, like you said, JP, it's not about loopholes. It's not about, trying to get away with something. That, by the way, that's rich people don't do that. That's what, people who make $100,000, $200,000 do. The IRS You look at their numbers, and over 50% of the cheating is done at that $100,000, $200,000 independent contractor level. It's not done by the rich people. They just don't cheat very much. I mean, I'm sure some of them do, but my clients certainly don't. Yeah. And so what are we looking at? Well, why then do they pay less tax? Well, they pay less tax just because they're serving more people. And
what I hear you saying, Tom, which is a totally different way than I've ever thought about it, is essentially, it's not that the fact that they're wealthy, it's the fact that any human being that has the ability to create a larger impact will have access to these kind of incentives, because the government's looking to incentivize people who can create more impact in the areas that they want to do, which is business, energy, food, agriculture, retirement, and other securities. It sounds like now it could be that these business leaders get to benefit more because they're having more impact, but it's not the fact that they have the balance in their bank account. It's that they have the ability, if used properly, to create larger impacts. Is that a good way to say it?
Point. That's a really good point. The only difference from a tax standpoint between the big business, the big entrepreneur, and the small business is the number of zeros. The tax consequences are exactly the same. By the way, this is in our Constitution. They have to be. The same two people do exactly the same thing, exactly the same way, they will get exactly the same result. Okay, that is the beauty of the U.S. Constitution. And by the way, most other developed countries, that they require the tax law to be fair. Now, that doesn't mean that if people do two different things, they're going to get the same result. That'd be like saying, I have a choice of two different people to marry, and I'm going to get the same result with each one. No, that's not going to happen. What it does say, though, is that if I'm in one situation and I choose to do that, and I make the same, a certain amount of money, say I make $100,000 at it, and somebody else does exactly the same thing, exactly the same way, they should pay the exact same amount of tax. So again, it doesn't matter if you're buying, Airbnbs, single family homes to rent out on Airbnb, or, small duplexes to rent out, or whether you're buying, building, $40, $50 million apartment complex. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just a number of zeros. The tax consequences are the same.
Interesting.
They're just more zeros on the bigger ones. That's all.
Interesting. So, Tom, I have a lot of people who are starting businesses in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, and they're starting businesses. I know you get hit as soon as you travel. Again, if you have an entrepreneur that's really trying to create a long-term sustainable business, again, they're even trying to bring social mission or value, what are the most common questions? Because I see most people know very little about taxes, or they've been doing things wrong. Do you have any advice, or the three things you keep telling people that you see over and over again, the mistakes or advice that you could give to kind of younger entrepreneurs?
Yeah. The first thing is that business and investing are team sports. Okay. These are not something you do on your own. Seriously. You don't want to go up against the IRS on an IRS audit. You hire people like me to go up against the IRS on an IRS audit. Okay. Second is ask better questions. So, I'll get people ask me a question. They'll hold up their coffee mug and they'll say, so, Tom, is this deductible? That's not a very good question, because I have no idea. A different question might be, Tom, how do I make this coffee mug deductible? Now, that's a good question, because now you're asking, how do I do something that I want to get done, and how do I do it tax effectively? Okay. So that's the question to be asking. The third one is stop listening to people who say don't or can't. Okay. Those words are not in my language. I know you know this, JP, but I've never met an entrepreneur who wanted to know what they can't do.
Yeah.
Not even once. Yeah. Again, 40 years, I've never met somebody who said, oh, tell me what I can't do, please. What is wrong with you? No. So what you want to do is, how can I do what I want to do? And you want advisors and people around you who are facilitating that. And then your job as an entrepreneur, frankly, is to facilitate other people and help them do what they want to do. The whole job of an entrepreneur is to solve problems. So, and to solve them for more people, more effectively, and at lower cost. That is the job of an entrepreneur. So, you want to start a business, keep in mind that, I would keep in mind those three things, that It's a team sport. So make sure you've got a team, including tax advisors, attorneys, et cetera, mentors, et cetera. Number two is ask better questions, right?
Yeah.
And then, you always want to go, okay, what do I need to ask, and how do I serve more people, and what problems am I solving?
And Tom, I actually get a lot of people asking me, how do I know if I have the right accountant? Like, how do I know? I think I'm paying too much in taxes because I heard this guy on the internet. What's that? Is it easy?
It's so easy. It's so easy. The way you know is how good are the questions that your accountant is asking you?
Yeah.
How good because the advisor's job is to ask good questions. It's kind of like, okay, so pretend you're going to see the doctor. You're not feeling well, whatever. Can you imagine a doctor who would you have 15 minutes with them. They spend 14 minutes telling you where they got their diploma and how great they are.
Yeah.
And they spend 1 minute asking you, and then they say, they go, what questions do you have for me?
Yeah.
What? No, they spend 14 minutes asking you questions, diagnosing the problem, and a minute writing the prescription. So that's what a tax advisor should do. If you're spending an hour with them, most of that hour should be them asking you questions so that they can diagnose what the challenges are, and then they can spend the last 5 minutes giving you the answer. But it's all about asking better questions.
Yeah. Tom, it's interesting when I think about our relationship. I don't know how many years we've been working together. 7, 8, 9, I don't know. But if you think about our conversations, they usually last about 10 minutes. Because I know, first of all, your time's valuable in getting us together. This is a special moment. But actually what we get accomplished in 8 to 10 minutes, because I actually don't ask you a question. I've also been doing this. You've taught me quite a bit. I'd say I'm much more tax literate. But I come to you when it's usually a pretty hard curveball. And you usually can take that question and answer in about 6 minutes. And if you don't know, because I try to give you a curveball occasionally that you don't even know, which doesn't happen very often. But the idea that we get back to it so quickly to an answer is great. And I also think another thing I wanted to share with the audience from my own experience with you. Again, I'm noticing now that I'm spending more time on Instagram since the podcast and stuff, that there's a lot of talking heads saying, you don't need to pay taxes at all. Or I don't pay taxes, and then the Lamborghini Countach roars through. And that could be true. But what I've also learned through my experience with you is there's a lot of possibilities out there, but each one of them that you take on a path has other consequences. Like if you need cash now, that might not be the best moment. Maybe sometimes it's better. You've told me many times, JP, it's a capital gain, pay your taxes. Or no, JP, I think on this one, let's do a 1031. I think this is a long-term. And so if any of you are out there, I would just give you my advice with years with Tom. If a talking head on Instagram is telling you don't need to pay taxes, it's way oversimplified because it is complex. Mm-hmm. There's multiple objectives. And don't feel bad. It's not about feeling good or bad. Taxes aren't bad. They're not good. There is a system, and Tom, you're really helping actually solidify this for me today. There's a system out there, and there's a government that has incentives, and there's a government that also needs to run. And you got to put that all together to make your best business decision. There's been many times where I've written bigger checks than I'd like to, and there's maybe some other alternatives, but from what I needed in that moment, Tom, whether it was liquidity, a big sale, what have you, I made a business decision to pay the tax. And there's great times where you've saved me by thinking of another strategy that was really smart, that was in alignment with my business, that we've done tremendous things with.
Yeah, one of the things we always say is don't let the tax tail wag the dog, right? So
right.
The taxes are a tail, they're not the body. So you do need to look at the investment first. You need to look at the business first. Just know that you can always make it. Almost always you can make it more tax effective. But you bring up a really good point, is that the goal here is to give you a choice, right? So for example, could I deduct every time I go on vacation? Yeah, I could. I don't. Why not? Because I would have to do certain things that I don't want to do when I'm on vacation. I would have to work on vacation. I don't want to work on vacation. Right. So I'm not going to deduct. So I don't get to deduct the vacation. If I did work on vacation, if I did go, meet with clients, et cetera, then great. I get to deduct that. I know but I have a choice. And the challenge that most people have is they don't have a choice because they have not learned the basics of wealth and taxes. And really the basics are, if you look at my first book, Tax-Free Wealth, it's an instruction guide. It tells you that the tax law is an instruction guide for reducing taxes. If you look at my second book, The Win-Win Wealth Strategy, you find out that the tax law is an instruction guide for building wealth and doing good in the world. So really the tax law, I think the tax law is amazing. I think it's, I'm kind of a total tax nerd, as you know, JP. And I just think that, my stupid people trick is to make it simple. And so so Win-Win Wealth. I had a great, question the other day. I had a high school teacher say, would you mind if I use this in my classroom? I said, absolutely not. You go do it. You go use Win-Win Wealth because it's such a simple concept. And we need people to be thinking differently about, about wealth and money's not, this goes back to Puritan times, right? Where, money's the root of all evil. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. Money is not good or evil. Money's just money. And so it's up to you whether you do good with it. And that's the whole point, right? Investing with a purpose. The whole point is that you're doing good with your money. Well, what if you think about how much more money you have if you didn't have to pay tax? And if you could build wealth and the more wealth you built, the less tax you pay, wouldn't that even be the best of all worlds, which is exactly what the Win-Win Wealth Strategy teaches you how to do.
While you're in alignment with what the government wants, which in my case is producing, workforce housing,
yep,
different things like that, makes a lot of sense. Hey, Tom, I'm going to ask you a book question, but before I jump, I have one more question about your book. I'm going to give this to my Thrive investors, and there's a lot of real estate questions going on. So I'm going to ask you the most common real estate question that I'm getting during these times right now of change. So obviously we're seeing a change in the economy. Interest rates are rising. I'm getting tons of phone calls from my investors. What do I do? And my response is simply this. Could things be less valuable as a price tag next year? Absolutely. Like interest rates, cap rates, there's a long history here. Absolutely. But at the same time, if you're worried about prices right now or things going down and you're going to feel really bad next year and kick yourself because your house or something you invested in is worth 20% less, don't do the investment. Hold the money in your pocket. But also think about this. If you're an investor who says, I'm a long-term player, I really want to hold some hard assets because I know my currency is depreciating at 8, 9, 10%, whatever they're telling us it's depreciating. And by the way, this is the last year, 2022, of this incredible tax incentive by the government that allows me to write off 100% depreciation in year one. And so if you put that all together, instead of worrying about, oh my God, what's this going to be worth next year? Hold on to your hat. If protecting your savings is important to you, and if you have some tax planning things where you could really take advantage and use this accelerated depreciation that's been out there that is going to sunset and slowly lower, that could be really smart for you, especially if it's a quality long-term asset. Do you think that's a perfectly reasonable response, or is there anything you want to add or subtract to that?
I'll take it one step further for you, JP.
Okay.
Consider that this is one of the rare times in history when inflation is higher than interest rates. Mm. And when inflation is higher than interest rates, that means that rents are going up, but your interest rates are not. So your interest rates let's say it's at 6%. People go, oh my heavens, that's so horrible. It wasn't that long ago. We thought 6% was a great interest rate.
It's cheap, okay? Yeah.
Oh my heavens, my mortgage is my interest rate's at 6%. Inflation's at 9%. Actually, in June, inflation was at 15.6% annualized. That's the government number. 1.3%, by the way, times 12. Okay.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, is 15.6. So the annualized inflation rate right now is over 15%, and yet interest rates are 6%. So, wouldn't it be better to have something that was appreciating and actually benefited from inflation, which real estate benefits from inflation because you're paying off that debt with cheaper dollars. So, debt is by the way, it's not one of the 7 investments I included in the real estate chapter, but debt is part of the magic of real estate, and it's part of the magic of taxes. You get such huge tax benefits because of debt. The government wants you to borrow. Period.
Amazing.
They want you to borrow as long as you're using it to create more assets and serve more people. You're going to get way better tax benefits. So absolutely, one more thing I'll share.
Please.
I was in Zimbabwe a few years ago with my wife. We were on an eco safari, and our guide was Engelbert, named after Engelbert Humperdinck, actually. Spoke 14 languages, college degree, brilliant guy. And he remembered when the Zimbabwe dollar went to zero and they had hyperinflation. He goes, every time I got paid, I would go buy a sheep, a pig, a goat, or a cow. And he said, why? Well, because I needed a hard asset because the currency was going to be worthless.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about. You're talking about buying a hard asset. Your real estate, while it may fluctuate in value, as long as you've got cash flow, who cares? Right. Who cares? As long as you've got cash flow, and your cash flow is going to be going up because of inflation where your interest rate isn't. So effectively effectively, you're continuing to make more money because you've got that debt on your real estate. And plus you're paying, practically zero tax. So I think it's a beautiful time, frankly, to be buying hard assets.
I think it's great. And I think to your point, Tom, it's like if you're trying to get the perfect time when people say, is this the time to invest? I think they're thinking, is the price right? Because they're thinking of their house. And it may not be the right question if you're thinking about long-term strategy, putting all these things in mind. And I think that's important because you can liberate yourself, because you can go out there and hear all these people giving you their economic advice. It's a lot of noise and it's a lot of talking heads. If it's a quality asset in a high growth area and you're looking long-term and you're not going to feel bad, just like my crypto went down 50%, I'm okay with it. I went into crypto with a long-term thesis that this is going to be a new way for humanity, to your point. Hopefully we're going to evolve from the pig and the sheep and the ox to other cryptocurrencies that can efficiently store value against deflationary currencies and government manipulation. So for the very same reason, I think if people could really, I can save you guys 100 questions. Is this the right time to invest? The answer is absolutely maybe. It all depends on what's between your brain. If you're going to feel bad about it, don't do it. But there's some really smart fundamentals if you go in with the right mentality. Is that fair, Tom, or what do you want to add to that?
No question. Investments don't make, investments aren't good or bad because the investment is good or bad. Investments are good or bad or bad because the investor is good or bad. So it's really about learning how to be a professional investor, learning how to do this. Once you learn it, people tell me all the time, well, I'm afraid of debt. I don't want any debt. They subscribe to the no debt philosophy. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. If you're afraid of debt, it's because you don't trust the asset. So all you're saying is the same thing. You're saying, well, if you're not investing, it's because you don't trust the asset. Well, how do you trust the asset? You get education, you try it out, you have team members around you that you trust, and you look at the facts. And the facts are inflation's higher than debt. Taxes strongly encourage real estate investing, and we're short on housing. So we have lots of housing to be built. We have lots of demand. We have way more demand than supply still. So why wouldn't you? Those are the things you're looking at. Stop looking at price, because start looking at cash flow. Start looking at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are still. I think they're very strong.
Today in work, this week in the New York Times, they're reporting that right now we're 1.8 million units behind in workforce housing apartment units. And even with all the development to catch up, particularly with my world and kind of the world of the workforce, this is a generational problem that again, the government can put more money. I know the Biden administration has been talking about it, but this is where governments come in and say this needs to be solved faster. And again, this is back to your point of where tax policy influences outcomes.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Tom,
you know what? They actually say that the low-income housing tax credit is the most important factor in building low-income housing, and they need more of that. They really do need to, redo that, encourage it, because we are short of workforce and low-income housing.
Okay, Tom. Okay, last two questions. You ready? One question is, here's my curveball for you. You and I always jam about forecasting for the future. Give me what's on your mind of what you think we might see in the next 1 to 3 years within taxes, within government, or just general business trends, or jam out any way you want to.
Well, the tax law doesn't change that fast. So we're not going to see a lot of changes in the next 2 to 3 years from a tax standpoint. We're just not. I mean, there's no, unless some weird thing happened and the Democrats won both the House and the Senate in November. If they do, we're going to see major tax changes. I guarantee you. So, if you don't want that to happen, get out and vote.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I would say that. And I think that smart investors are going to do really well, and I think people who don't have good financial education are going to be really hurting. And I think there are going to be a lot of people really hurting, and because the government, I don't think, going to bail them out. Like they did over the last couple of years. I think you really have to take our stand. And the other thing is I think we do have a war on small business going on right now. Started during COVID when they shut down small business, left big business open. And it continues with this war against, we're going to promote labor unions. And, if you don't have a labor union, you're a bad business. And this whole idea. So there is this war on small business, and we do need to speak out. We do need to say, and this is why I think getting a book out like the Win-Win Wealth Strategy is so important, because this is like a life work for me, because we've got to change the dialogue. We have to change the dialogue, else this country's going down. Yeah. This country has survived on freedom of entrepreneurship. And if you take that away, or you let that be taken away, then, if we do, shame on us. Yeah. And so we need to get the message out. We need to let people that know that, entrepreneurs are good people. They are the lifeblood of the world. And the fact that they pay lower taxes is simply because the government is incentivizing them to do what the government wants done. And then, make sure that all people know that the more good I do, the less tax I pay.
Well, Tom, I so appreciate your time. I can tell you from meeting many, many people in my career, there is no one better than Tom when it comes to, you can tell why. We go way beyond taxes. There's humanity, there's government, there's so many things. Just to remind you guys, Tax-Free Wealth, I think you said had sold over 300,000 copies. Tom is a best-selling author. We're not guessing here, guys. Tom has been around the world, and I just feel very lucky to actually that we get the opportunity in our friendship and what have you. I am going to offer my Thrive clients and close friends a copy of the book. So if you guys reach out to me, ping out to me, how to, I'm going to send you a copy of Tom's book, which is just coming out now. Also, if you're new to the podcast, if you like the podcast and ask me, since Tom's theme was an intelligent question, if you ask me a well thought out question or suggestion of the podcast, because I'm open to suggestions, I will also send you a book. And for those other ones, Tom, where can they get this book if they want to get a copy of it?
Easiest place is Amazon. So
nice.
I'm a little partial to Amazon. I mean, they do take a large portion of the cost of the book and they keep it. But you know what? They get the word out, and it's all about getting the word out. So happy to have you go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. And if they say sold out, then tell them you need to order this book. So, but the easiest place is Amazon.
Tom, thank you so much again. And I have a feeling we'll be talking soon, but it's such a treat sharing you with my audience. Thank you so much.
Always. Thank you, JP.
Okay. Take care.